Most people will work for over 4 decades and still not have enough to stop. Somewhere in that same world, a small group of people retire before 35. Not because they inherited money, not because they got lucky with crypto, not because they earned 6 figures at some tech giant. The difference is a specific set of decisions made inside a 5-year window, and almost nobody actually runs the numbers on what those decisions cost. And when you actually run them, most people don't like what they find. So today, we're going to run them. Every year, every trade-off, every number. By the end, you might realize the 5-year plan isn't quite what you thought it was. Now, in the last video, we talked about stopping unnecessary spending. But even if you fix that, this is the math that actually decides your future. Because cutting your morning coffee isn't the problem. The problem is that most people never sit down and seriously ask, what would it actually take? Not a rough idea, not a motivational answer, the actual math. And once you see it clearly, you can't unsee it. So let's run it, year by year, on one real person with real numbers. Ryan is 27. He makes $85,000 a year. He has $5,000 saved. And he has decided he is done working by 32. Not switching careers, not taking a sabbatical, done, permanently. To make that happen, he needs $750,000 in 5 years. Starting from almost nothing, on a salary where the average person his age saves about $4,000 a year. The math he needs: save 75% of every paycheck, earn a 10% return every single year, and never have a single financial emergency. Miss any one of those and the timeline falls apart. Most finance channels will tell you this is impossible. A few will sell you a course saying it's easy. Both are wrong. The real answer is more interesting than either, because the answer isn't whether this works, it's what it actually costs. But before we follow Ryan anywhere, we need to define what he's actually chasing. Because financial freedom gets thrown around constantly, and it means 3 very different things depending on who's saying it. Full financial independence is the classic version. Your investments generate enough income to cover every expense, forever. Travel, healthcare, housing, all of it. You never need to earn another dollar. Lean financial independence is the same idea, smaller scale. Your portfolio covers the basics: rent, food, utilities, basic transport, nothing more. If you want extras, you can work, but you don't have to. And then there's Coast Financial Independence, the quiet one. It means you've invested enough, early enough that compound growth alone will carry you to full retirement by 60 or 65. Even if you never save another dollar, you still work to cover today's bills. But the retirement problem is already solved. Each version has a number. That number comes from something called the 4% rule, a guideline from retirement research that says if you withdraw 4% of your portfolio each year, the money should last roughly 30 years through most market conditions. Flip that math around and you get a simple formula. Multiply your annual expenses by 25. Ryan runs the numbers on his own life. If he moves somewhere cheaper, cuts his car, and strips his lifestyle down to the essentials, he can live on $30,000 a year. Multiply by 25, and his target is $750,000. That's lean FI for Ryan. $750,000 in 5 years, starting from $5,000. This is where most people look at the math and close the tab. Ryan doesn't. The most important number in personal finance isn't your income. It isn't your investment return. It's your savings rate, the percentage of what you earn that you actually keep. At a 15% savings rate, reaching financial independence takes about 43 years. That's a full career. At 25%, it drops to 32 years. At 50%, 17 years. At 65%, 10 years. To hit it in 5, Ryan needs to save 75% of every paycheck. Here's what that means in actual dollars. Ryan earns $85,000. After taxes, he takes home around $65,000. A 75% savings rate means investing $48,750 and living on $16,250 a year. That's $1,354 a month for rent, food, transport, utilities, and everything else. In most American cities, that barely covers rent. So Ryan does what every serious person on this timeline eventually has to do. He moves. He picks a low cost of living city where a 1-bedroom runs $700 a month. He sells his car and buys a used bicycle. He cancels every subscription. He stops eating out and learns to cook the same 6 meals on rotation. And here's the part people don't talk about. He misses weddings because flights cost money. He turns down bachelor parties. He stops going to concerts. His social circle shrinks to a few friends who don't mind meeting for a walk instead of dinner. There are moments where it doesn't feel like discipline. It just feels like you're missing your own life. His 20s start to look very different from everyone else's 20s, and that gap between his life and the one he's watching everyone else live is a cost that doesn't show up in any spreadsheet, but the math starts working. By the end of year one, Ryan has invested $48,000. With a modest return, his portfolio sits at roughly $56,000. He's on pace. And then he discovers something every aggressive saver figures out in year one. You cannot cut your way to $750,000 on $85,000 a year. Even at 75% savings, 5 years of contributions only gets him to around $250,000. The other $500,000 has to come from somewhere else, and that's where year two begins. Because there are only 3 levers in this game: income, how much comes in; expenses, how much goes out; returns, how hard your invested money works while you sleep. Year one was pure expense compression. Year two is income. Ryan attacks it from 3 angles at once. First, he negotiates. 2 years at his company never asked for a raise. He builds a case, specific wins, market data, a calm and prepared conversation. He gets 12%. Base salary moves from $85,000 to $95,000. Second, he stacks skills. He notices the analysts earning more all have one specific certification and experience with a particular software suite. He spends 6 months of evenings earning it. Then he job hops. New role, $110,000. A 30% jump from combining an internal raise and an external move. Third, he starts a side income. Freelance consulting using the same skills he uses at work. 10 hours a week at $75 an hour. That's another $39,000 a year before taxes. By the end of year two, Ryan's total income has grown from $85,000 to roughly $149,000. His expenses are still around $18,000 because he kept the lean lifestyle from year one. His savings rate is now pushing 85%. Year two ending portfolio, approximately $135,000. Now, here's where this video is going to be straight with you. Most people cannot execute what year two requires. Negotiating a raise requires a job where your performance is measurable. Skill stacking requires energy that most full-time workers simply don't have left after 40 hours a week. Side income requires a marketable skill, employer permission, and enough stamina to work evenings consistently without burning out. The reason 5-year FI is rare isn't that the math is impossible. It's that pulling all 3 levers simultaneously for years without letting up is a lifestyle most people legitimately don't want. That is not a failure. That is a reasonable choice. Ryan chose the harder path. You may not. And by the end of this video, that might actually look like the smarter call. Which brings us to year 3. And this is the most important year of the entire simulation. Not because of what Ryan does, because of what he discovers he doesn't have to do anymore. Up to this point, it looks like Ryan has only one option. Keep pushing harder. More income, more sacrifice, more compression. Just grind until the number appears. But this is where everything changes. Entering year 3, Ryan has $135,000 invested. He's 29 years old. And here's the calculation that changes everything. If Ryan never contributes another single dollar, if he stops saving aggressively, buys a car, travels, lives normally, and simply lets that $135,000 sit in an index fund for the next 30 years, it grows to approximately $1.36 million by age 59. Full financial independence at traditional retirement age, without saving another cent. This is Coast FI, and this is the part nobody tells you, because Coast FI quietly dismantles the entire case for extreme frugality. If $135,000 invested at 29 already solves your retirement, why are you still living on $1,300 a month? Now let's make this concrete with a comparison that might genuinely surprise you. Meet Jake. Same age as Ryan, same starting salary, same city, same job, same background. Jake did what most financial advisors recommend, saved 15% of his income from age 22, put it in index funds, and otherwise lived a completely normal life. At the start of year 3, Jake has about $38,000 invested. Ryan has $135,000. On the surface, Ryan is winning by a landslide. But zoom out to the finish line. Jake keeps saving 15% through age 65. He ends with roughly $1.4 million. Ryan, if he stops contributing at 29, ends with roughly $1.36 million at 59. Same destination. Ryan arrives 6 years earlier. That's it, not 10 times better. Not a completely different outcome. 6 years. Ryan spent his entire mid to late 20s in extreme austerity, turning down weddings, shrinking his social life, living on $1,300 a month, to buy approximately 6 years of early retirement over someone who simply saved consistently and lived normally. That's not an argument against Ryan's path. 6 years of freedom is genuinely significant. But it's a very different story from the one most aggressive FI content sells you. Now here's another assumption the 5-year math quietly depends on. The market cooperates. The S&P 500 has averaged roughly 10% annually over the last century. That number is real, and it hides an enormous amount of turbulence underneath it. Any single 5-year window can look nothing like the average. So let's run 3 scenarios for Ryan's year 4, starting from $200,000 after another year of aggressive contributions. Bull case. Markets deliver 12% annually. Portfolio grows to $260,000 from returns alone, plus $90,000 in contributions. Ryan ends year 4 at $350,000, ahead of schedule. Base case. Markets deliver 8%. Ryan ends year 4 at roughly $315,000, on track but tight. Bear case. Markets drop 15%. Ryan's $200,000 becomes $170,000 before contributions. Even adding $90,000 in savings, he ends the year at $260,000. His timeline just collapsed by 18 months. This is called sequence of returns risk. A bad year early in your accumulation phase hits far harder than a bad year late because the compounding you were counting on simply doesn't happen. This plan works only if nothing goes wrong, and 5 years is a very short window in which to hope that nothing does. So let's say year 4 hits the base case. Ryan ends it with $315,000. 1 year left, $750,000 needed. That's a $435,000 gap to close in 12 months. Maximum contributions at his 85% savings rate on a $160,000 income, about $110,000 for the year. Investment growth on $315,000 at 10%, roughly $31,500. That gets him to around $460,000, not $750,000. To close that gap in 1 year, Ryan would need roughly a 90% return on his portfolio. That is not investing. That is speculation. This is where things break. Ryan ends year 5 at approximately $460,000. By the strictest definition of the goal he set at 27, he failed. He missed the target by 40%. But here's the part most people misunderstand. $460,000 at age 32 is not a failure. It is a launch pad. If Ryan stops contributing completely at 32 and lets that money compound at 8% for 15 years, he has $1.46 million at 47. Full financial independence, covering roughly $58,000 in annual expenses 13 years before traditional retirement, without saving another dollar. If he keeps contributing at a normal 20% savings rate, he hits full FE around age 40. 8 years from now. Ryan didn't achieve financial freedom in 5 years. He achieved it somewhere between year 5 and year 8. And he did it at an age when most of his peers are still paying off student loans and wondering if they'll ever be able to afford a house. He paid a real price. 5 years of extreme frugality compresses relationships. It narrows your world. Some of those years in your 20s don't come back. Whether the trade was worth it is a question only Ryan can answer honestly. But the math is clear. The 5-year finish line is almost never hit exactly. What chasing it actually does is launch you so far ahead of everyone else that even falling short feels like winning. So here's what to take from all of this. 4 things. First, savings rate is the most powerful variable. Not income, not returns. A modest earner saving 50% will retire faster than a high earner saving 10%, every time. Second, the 3 levers work best together. Cutting expenses alone is slow. Growing income alone is slow. Compounding alone is slow. Pull all 3 simultaneously and timelines collapse. Third, Coast FI is the underrated finish line. If Ryan's path sounds brutal, it probably is for you. Front-load your savings in your 20s, hit a Coast number, often somewhere between $100,000 and $200,000 depending on your age, then ease off and let the math finish the job. That is not giving up. That is playing the game intelligently. And fourth, the 5-year promise is a direction, not a guarantee. The value isn't in hitting it precisely. It's in how far ahead you land when you miss. Ryan bought back roughly 25 years of his life. You might buy back 10. Someone else might buy back 5. All of those are wins.